just as we get started with us, tell me a little bit about who you are.
So I am Mike Sullivan. Been director for Sedgewick County Economic Development for almost the last 6 years. Position that I was lucky enough to kind of fall into. I love sales, and it's all about a lot about doing that. What we've really grown this into, I work with a good gentleman out of Lincoln, Nebraska named Craig Schroeder, who has really been for the last 20 years really a leader in youth engagement and youth entrepreneurship. And he and I have grown this over the last 5 or 6 years to be more about helping students find a relevant career pathway that is meaningful to them, whatever that is. Been pretty fortunate in my life, and it's a great job. With all the COVID, it has really changed what that whole picture looks like. This morning I met with a gal from Morgan Community College, and then Brush Schools, Brush, Colorado. They just got, we can call it a CTE coordinator. I don't know what the exact title is, but this guy was a principal. Now he's moving into this position where he's going to get students into the workplace and give them credit for that while they're working during the school day, which is really for those students that don't want to be a biologist or an astrophysicist and want some on-the-job training. That's valuable skills. Those are valuable skills for anybody. So that's where I was at this morning. We do that all the time, all over the place.
So, what impact has COVID had on your program?
Well, so when this started, what should we say? What was it? I can't even remember the first part of March.
Yeah.
We also take technology, virtual reality, augmented reality. We just last week built a bunch of e-gaming computers for kids to use, 3D printers. We go to schools, we talk to kids about what that pathway exploration might look like for them, how they should get connected with employers. We take all this technology and go to schools, and I was booked all the way through almost the end of June. I was going to finish up with what Morgan Community College calls a body shop, and that's where kids can come in and for a week.
We're going to work with them.
Yeah, I was going to say you guys should be part of that. These kids can explore the medical world. It was just like you walked over there and flipped the light switch off. I mean, everything was canceled. Everything. And a lot of the discussions this morning, plus last week when we built these computers with 7 kids that ranged from ages 10 to 18. I was working with a teacher from Akron. Nobody knows what the school year is going to look like yet. It's like Ron, the guy from Brush Schools, was saying this morning, students are probably going to have the option to have their kids stay at home. Well, what is that going to look like? Which he had been an AD director in his previous life. There's probably not going to be any volleyball, any football, any basketball, any wrestling, any of those sports that, you know, that you cannot practice social distancing. And what sports can you? We joke, what we're going to do, badminton and tennis. So they don't know what that school year is going to look like. Therefore, we don't know what we can do. That week, right before everything absolutely shut off, I was down at Seabird on I-70 and spent 3 days with their kids down there talking to them. And, you know, you're not going to, I hate to say it, I hope we can end up back in the schools soon, but I don't know what that's going to look like.
So, tell me a little bit about the kids you serve and in your communities, because these aren't really very large communities.
Well, right. Seabird was not much different than the size of school district where, well, my grandkids go now at Revere and Ovid. You know, you want to get into really small districts, we can go down to Nicky Campo School District down south of Burton, or south of Lyman, south of, we're down on the Oklahoma border, sorry. But her district has less than 50 kids K through 12, and they will not have a graduating class for another year.
And this is an entire this is the entire school district. We're not talking a class.
Nope.
We're talking 50 kids
K through 12.
in how many square miles? Like,
Huge area. It's down south of, how come I can't think of the name of the town that's right down there on the southern, right down 385. Anyway, huge area. They're around a lot of BLM ground. So, yeah, so all it is pasture. Yeah.
so, and they're struggling with how to social distance with a school district of 50?
Well, I haven't.
Explain that one.
Those districts, I haven't talked to Nick.
Yeah.
He said, and then we've got engaged with Ogallala school districts in Nebraska last year. Well, they have close to 1,000. Ron was talking, they have 1,550 students in Brush. So Sterling, we work with them. We work with districts of all sizes. But we work with any young man or woman. It doesn't matter who they are.
What's going to happen to these students and their education if it stops?
Well, and so I had somebody tell me the other day that was that you telling me their sister taught somewhere? No, it was somebody up in Wyoming. Their sister was in Wyoming. I remember who it was, and I'm not going to mention any names. But she said all the students, whether they showed up, whether they did any work, whether they did anything last year, got passed. So there's not that accountability, but it's, and you can't hold education responsible because this is uncharted territory. Nobody knows what's going on. We've never done this before. So I could show you some pictures of when those kids last week were building those computers. I mean, they were engaged. They had to troubleshoot. They literally had a box of parts that we ordered. They had power supplies and RAMs and processors, and they had to build computers. And it was really pretty cool. These kids got to pick if they wanted to do this class, but the beauty of hands-on stuff like this is sometimes the kids that aren't always the superstars get to be superstars. And we had a couple of those in this last round. And probably going to build another 5 or 10 computers just because we think that with the social distancing, so these kids can take these computers home to their 5 different safe, separate locations and game together from. So it solves a lot of problems. Who knows? I was communicating with Katie, that teacher in Akron this morning. She said, we don't know if our school's even going to let us congregate.
So let's just use Washington County as an example. Last I checked, Washington County, in the entire county of 3,000 people, that they didn't have one incident of COVID.
You talking Washington or Sedgwick?
Washington.
Sedgwick County, where I live, just got their first complaint cases.
So are people are trying to social distance, but yet sounds like we have these rules that have been employed for health reasons. How's that working in the areas that you're working in?
Doesn't really affect me too much in the areas I work in. We want to talk about society as a general. Do I believe that those populations that need to take extra precautions should be protected? Heck yes, I do. A really good friend of mine, lifelong friend of mine, was in the nursing home in Holyoke, and I haven't been able to go see her since March, and now she went down to Texas with the kids, and Rosella and I have been friends for a long time. Do those people need protected? You bet they do. It's different in rural than it is. So I am the mayor of Ovid, and we're working on a master plan for the town to replace infrastructure.
How big is Ovid?
300 on a good day.
Okay. 300 people on a good day.
That's
okay.
when people come to town. And we're working with an engineering firm out of Boulder. And after 2 or 4 weeks, we had a Zoom call. And the guys at this firm said, Mike, tell me about how it's affecting you guys in rural. And I said, well, can you guys get groceries, whatever? I said, well, I have a freezer full of meat in my garage anyway, and my son's working a packing plant, and I can stuff out of the garden. So did I need to rush out and hoard everything? No. We're used to taking care of ourselves. And he said, you guys don't stay at home right around your area. And I said, how did you get that information? He said, well, if you go to Google or whoever it was, they track your cell phone. We can see where you've all been. I said, well, the farmer may farm some stuff 40 miles north of the house and 40 miles south of the house. And I said, our grocery store is not 2 blocks down around the corner. It's 30 miles to the closest Walmart. And I exercise daily. And you know what? I think I had it in January anyway, because I really felt terrible for about 2 or 3 weeks. And if it's my turn to go, guess what? I don't have to deal with this crap anymore.
What's been your biggest challenge?
Just not knowing what this next year is even going to look like as far as being able to work in the schools, which we do on a continual, ongoing basis at whatever. So Craig and I have also been coaches for Colorado Succeeds, which is a program. I can't call it an NGO, but we were there with CareerWise, which is called Colorado Succeeds, and it's all about getting communities ready to help their students get engaged with the employers in their communities. Because what has spurred all this, if you're ever going to grow rural, and I don't care whether it's Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, call it rural America, you've got to find ways for these kids to come back or stay in your community. Craig has surveyed thousands of students, and over 50% of them say they would love to stay in their rural communities. Over 75% say they don't know how. And we think it's as simple as they've never been invited to stay. Because we have told them for years, the only way you're ever going to be successful is to go off and get a 4-year degree, right? That's all they've ever been told. Oh, you can't stay here, you'll be a failure. So we think it's as simple as they've never been invited, and they don't know that Bob and Mary that have run the hardware store for the last 20 years would love to have somebody they could bring in, train, and transition the business over to. They don't even know that. So we think it's as simple as making some introductions, and that's how we're going to grow rural. You know, you've got to find the people that love being there, because rural is a different lifestyle than what is right outside this window here in Greeley. It's a whole lot. So
You telling me you don't think Greeley, Colorado's rural?
no. Come on, Monica. Yeah, you got to get about 100 miles that way before you're even thinking about rural.
So are these rural kids, do you think they're disproportionately impacted by this COVID activity? I mean, how is it really impacting you? It's pushed you in a wait and see mode. What's it doing to them?
I would say it's probably the same thing for them, to wait and see, because I can show you text messages from different districts. They don't know yet. So Ron and I was just picking up bits and pieces. They were talking about some young man, I assume it was, because they're talking about football, but it could be a young lady, that this was his senior year and he wanted to get some scholarships. Well, guess what? You can't play football, right? So what's that going to do to, I don't know. It's a shame. Yeah, I don't know that anybody has that answer yet.
So for you personally,
Okay.
what's been the hardest to professionally waiting to see? And it's, I guess we need to say this is July 17th.
Yeah, yeah.
So not for us, harvest has just occurred. So summer's on its downslide.
Don't say that.
It is, but you're not too far. So we don't know that. But you personally, what's been the biggest challenge? You live in a town of 300 people.
You know, I have always, so it probably boils down to personality. I've always tried to have at least a 3 to 5 year track of what I see.
Okay.
And that is just absolutely gone. It's vaporized. I really struggle with that. My biggest personal struggle is that, because I'll be 58 in 2 weeks. And I was joking with a buddy of mine the other night. I said, I got my right turn signal on and I'm looking for the next exit. and my foot's off the accelerator. I'm ready to, well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this. Well, what's that even going to look like?
So you work with economic development, not only working with the students, but also the businesses.
Yeah.
So what's happening with these small businesses in these communities? Are they going to come back? Are they?
Well, we've been pretty fortunate in the community I live in. We have a foundation that was started by a bachelor farmer, and they give away quite a bit of money. We've given utility credits to the local businesses for the last 3 months. A lot of them have said, with the Paycheck Protection Program and the utility credits, we would give up to a large business in our community $1,000 a month for utility credits. Once this help is over, if they go through another period where, all your beauty parlors and all your restaurants and all that stuff were shut down, I hate to think what's going to happen to some of those. I had one restaurateur told me that I don't know what I'm going to do. This was probably the 1st of June.
Okay.
They told me that when my PPP runs out the middle of July, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. Good, bad, or otherwise, I think you're going to see a real shift in what our economy looks like and consequently what the workforce is going to look like. And we had this discussion clear back at the very onset of this. We were on a coaching call with Colorado Succeeds. There's a gentleman out of Clear Creek County that used to be school administrator and a couple other people. And he said, I think you're going to see a real shift in education. And we said, I think you're going to see a real shift in the workforce. And look at how we conduct commerce now. You can't run down to whatever your favorite store used to be necessarily and just have at free will. How much are we ordering on Amazon? Look at what Starbucks did with 500 of their stores. They eliminated the walk-in and they're just going to make them drive-thrus. And you're beginning, and I don't watch the news. It's too depressing. It really is. But so that's why I don't have a lot of other instances but I'll bet you're going to see a lot of businesses change their model as to what they look like. And I think that's really going to affect the workforce. We've got over 30 million people in this country unemployed right now. So that means their jobs were in hiatus or whatever it is. Well, if that job place changes and whatever that percentage of the jobs they used to have been eliminated, say it's half, where are you going to put those people back to work? I think we're really headed for some rough territory.
How much of the jobs that you're currently looking at now and just anticipating for future are so reliant on internet? And is the internet reliable in the communities you serve?
Well, and that was a big issue, especially at the onset when all these schools just said, go home. There was a lot of talk of, is the infrastructure strong enough? Because some homes, their internet comes from this. We had one mom that said their kids had to start doing their homework from home, and she said, I have a hotspot on my phone. There's no way 4 kids with Chromebooks or whatever can use my hotspot. In the beginning, it was a little sketchy, and some days your internet worked pretty good, and some days it didn't. But that has seemed to level out. I don't think they're telling us the whole story. I think there's probably more fiber out there than you can even imagine. So in Ovid, my sons game a lot. And they were excited because we had the option to upgrade in Ovid, a little town where I live. EC Telecom put fiber everywhere in Ovid. So they were excited to go that they could, for $70 a month, they could get 500 megs. And so they can get 320, 350 as a download speed. So
they can talk endlessly, play endlessly with people all across the world.
They have buddies, yeah, they do, from literally all over the world. You never know whether it's New Zealand, Great Britain, where they're playing with kids, but their buddies are beginning to come down from Gillsburg. They had one come down last night and game with them because their speeds are so much better in Ovid than they are in Gillsburg. That connectivity, so in Julesburg, we were given a building by PC Telecom and we remodeled it all. And I've got it full now. But PC Telecom told me at the onset, if you need a gig up and a gig down, it's not a problem. So I don't know if we're fortunate where we're at. I'm sure you get into some of the other parts of the world, the Kit Carsons, the Sheridan Lakes, some of those places that are a little less far removed. I'm sure some places up around Craig, you get very far from town and connectivity is probably a real issue.
Have you mentioned your philanthropic organization. What about the business community? How are they responding to be supportive? So we hear stories from far away in more urbanizing areas where the business community is struggling, but in the rural communities, oftentimes we're seeing the local community supporting each other. And are you guys seeing anybody changing what they've done before and now providing additional services? Or?
Well, excuse me, to an extent. So as you were putting that question together, I was thinking of some of the local businesses that I've had a lot of direct contact with. So in Sedgewick, there's a hotel. Lupe has run kind of just a little hotel. She gets a lot of hunters in the fall. She's full through the fall and early winter. She has shut down completely. There's only one body shop in the whole county. And that guy, when we first started this utility credit program, I went and saw him right away. He said, I'm not too bad right now. Talked about a buddy of his in Ogallala. They said they were working every other week. His brother in Denver didn't have anything to do with that part. It's pretty much out of work. People aren't driving as much. You know, that curve might be coming back, but there's, you got to drive to have accidents, so there's always that lag.
Right.
But my sons run the cutting floor, a little packing plant there in Ovid. This little plant's been here for 40 plus years. You and I talked and I asked, and they said, we're not even doing goats and sheep and that stuff. We're not even going to take them.
Mm-hmm.
They're booking for next May. So they're twice as busy as what they were before, and their job security's locked.
Just so we have this down, I get what that means next May. Explain why that could be a problem in the supply chain for a cattle operator who can't get his or her meat processed.
Well, so, there were a lot of the big plants, the JBL here, really shut down. Can you imagine how many head of cattle were probably in their holding pens waiting to go in to be processed? Probably thousands.
Yeah.
So, as a producer of livestock, it doesn't matter whether you're growing chickens or elephants, when they're ready to process, they're ready to process. It's not like, so they're ready in September. Oh yeah, it's fine. I'll wait till May. It doesn't work that way because there is cost of production. And once that animal has reached maturity, it's time to, if I'm going to make any money, I'm not going to feed them for the next 6 months and not have them gain any weight. Because that's, we're all, I don't care who you are, we all go to work to make a paycheck. Even the richest people in the world are there for a paycheck, or they'd be going to doing what they love to do. So we've all got to make a paycheck, and it's all got to make sense. So that's the problem. How do you plan a year from now to have an animal ready? It's real difficult.
Yeah.
You know what? Because the animal could get sick. I mean, there's so many. Yeah.
That's a long time. That's a whole cycle.
Well, and then the animal. So what's funny is when this whole thing started, the two gals that run the front desk there, I would talk to them, and people from the front range were calling like crazy. And they were driving out there to buy meat. And they said, well, can't I just get a cow cut up? And I said, no. After we butcher the animal, a cow has to hang for a minimum of 14 days. And they don't, so it's a month before you're going to get they don't understand that. There is a different mindset from urban to rural. People in the cities think there's a machine in the back of the grocery store that spits out eggs. And that, yeah, you turn on the faucet and milk comes out, and you turn on this handle and it's chocolate. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
So talking about that, one of the
Mhm.
things else that's going on right now is huge social movement that's occurring across the United States. Are you guys removed from that? Are you seeing any impacts of?
On the onset, there were some just protests in Sidney, Nebraska, which is about 30 miles north, Yuma, which is about 90 south. But these are towns of less than 10,000 people. That's about all the closer it got. So off the record, how I don't know whether to voice my personal opinions in this or not.
Maybe you could just share those with me later if you want. Just, I mean, it is something that's occurring,
Sure,
and it's occurring globally, but.
And it's a real deal. My personal feeling is, and thank you, Lord, for where I was born, because all of us that were born in the United States, we've already won the lottery once. Because 98% of the rest of the world would kill somebody to spend a day in yours or my shoes. If you go through the numbers, the US population makes up less than 5% of the world's population, but we consume 25% of the world's natural resources. By our own definition, only half of us are above the poverty line. That means 2% of us. I don't wonder where my next meal's coming from. Again, thank you, Lord. 98% of the rest of the world would kill to spend a day in my shoes. And I wonder personally if I have not been sensitive enough in my lifetime, and I do not want to make someone feel uncomfortable. When I went to high school with the Noyas and Shimamotos and Kinishitas, Natsukas and Yoshimotos, and I went to school with Martinez's and Paez's and Perez's, and there wasn't any color. I didn't see Fred and Danny Granello any different than I did Gary at Shimamoto or Mike Inoue that I graduated with, or Virginia Gutierrez. I think it only becomes an issue when you make it an issue. You've seen the one on Facebook, the little white and the black baby that come running up to each other, and you know you don't know what racism is until you're told about it. Again, it goes back to, if I have offended someone, I'm sorry. But I think we're getting a little carried away. One of my favorite songs by Mandisa is "We All Bleed the Same." You take a knife and go like this, I don't care what color it is on the outside of your blood, it's the same color. And, yeah. Have there been some injustices in the past? Yes. But if we want to relive those until the second coming of Christ, we're never going to get any better.
So talking about blood.
Mm-hmm. I wonder where this conversation is going.
Healthcare. We just need to talk about just a few.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I know about healthcare.
Mm-hmm. What impact has COVID had on the local healthcare system?
I think it's been, so let's do that one first. Answer that part first. I think it's been the same everywhere. You and I were talking about your friend in Wiggins, and his daughter, the nurse, had to deliver the baby. Mm-hmm. Because I think healthcare facilities access has really been limited. Excuse me. You know, they've talked about all the surgeries and elective surgeries and all the, you know, the knee replacements and that stuff have been shut off. And I have had discussions, you know, you're trying to do a diagnosis over this computer. Well, stick your tongue out a little further because I can't see it on the computer. And how do you, what's your forehead feel like and how broken's your arm? You got to wonder how, not that our healthcare system was the best anyway, but it saved my bacon. But, you know, how many misdiagnoses are there going to be because of, there needs to be, a doctor can't diagnose you over the computer, I don't think. I've never been a doctor, So there has been limited access.
Limited access.
And then I know in our hospital, they took part of it, as I'm sure they have in all hospitals, and those were COVID beds. And so you don't have the same capacity either.
So how many beds do you have in your local hospital?
You'd know that answer, and I don't. I think it's 14.
14.
And I think they made 6 COVID. Am I right?
I believe they, 50% split.
Yeah, So I have never spent a night in that hospital, but my mom, yeah. And that's just a guess, but I didn't know. But yeah, so, that reduces your capacity by, what, 40%?
Well, and because life still occurs. I mean,
Yeah,
particularly in farming communities where it's a higher risk jobs and engagements and manual labor and meat chopping and all of those things. Yeah.
Right. Again, we've been pretty fortunate. Yeah, you still hear the helicopters every once in a while, so there's still, there's still access. But I suppose it's all maybe more that critical care access, I would guess, probably.
So with COVID and the change in the world, do you feel more isolated? Are you happy that if that's the case that you are?
Well, so my sons are 21 and 24, and they still live with me. They work at that packing plant. We tried for a while to find them a house to buy in town, and in all of rural America, there's a huge housing shortage. But anyway, even my sons that are 22 and 24 that would love to be someplace else 6 months ago are very, very thankful they live where they live. We are isolated, and it's a good isolation. We don't have to worry so much about our food supply or the safety thereof. We're eating tomatoes out of the garden right now, and for the record, those are tasty stuff. The cheeseburgers we grilled last night, I buy at the packing plant. I buy them by the case. The steaks we had the night before came from the same place, and I don't mind being rural at all right now, and I'm actually thinking about becoming even further rural, less connected.
What do you want history to remember about COVID crisis, and what are you going to tell your grandkids?
I don't know that there's going to be a damn thing come out of this that's going to be worth repeating. I don't think there's any good. I think it's all blown completely out of proportion. Folks, it's just the flu. How many people die from cardiac conditions every year? I think, unfortunately, what I'll probably tell my kids is, man, America lost its mind during that period. And I hope we regain it. I hope we regain our common sense. Folks, it's just the flu. Are some people going to die? Yup. Do people die every day? Yep. I can bring up the world population counter and show you how many are being born and how many are dying as we speak. There's a counter that shows exactly. You can live in fear, or you can live with confidence that whatever happens is not in my control anyway. And I try not to drift people off. It comes back to your beliefs, and you and I said it before. If it's my turn, so be it. I don't know what I'll tell my grandkids, and I have grandkids right now. And one of them was in the class that helped build those computers, and the other one's Stewie. He's 4 years old. Luckily, he probably won't remember much of it.
Crazy times.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else we need to memorialize about how you're feeling? And so you look like you're doing well.
Yeah, I exercise daily. Minimum of a half hour. Some of my right bike's a lot. That's with my phone ring. Got my bike fixed. I don't eat the best, not like I used to, but oh well. You can either get busy living or you can get busy dying, one of my favorite sayings. And we can worry about and we can spread hate and discontent, or you can be happy you woke up this morning. And try and spread that to other people around you. I wish that I brought with me, and it's actually in the car. So I have some statistics to show how many muscles it takes to smile and how many it does to frown, and these are from a medical journal. It really does take less to smile than it does to frown. If we all just cared for each other a little more, and I don't care what color you are, what race you are, what your beliefs are, if we just cared and showed people that, I think the world would be a lot better place. Remember God's #1 commandment to us. Love me before anybody else, but then show your neighbor that love too. I think that would help us a bunch. Show some compassion. When you see that person broke down alongside the road, because in our part of the world, you're beginning to see a lot more people traveling and vehicles that shouldn't be on the road anyway. And don't be afraid to stop and help those, because Jesus said, what you do for the least of me, you do for me. So you never know. You never know what an angel looks like.
That's true. All right, my final question to you, to share. So through all of this, have you had any aha moments or personal growth that you weren't looking for?
We came up with some tough questions there, Mona.
Yeah.
So you and I were talking beforehand that, so I attend religious services on a regular basis, and man, when they shut that off, that bothered me a bunch. I really, really missed that, and I would drive a long ways to a church service. Here's one. So when this started, I mean, it was days after it started. Good friend of mine works for Corey Gardner in Yuma, Colorado. And this was after Congress shut down, the world shut down. Corey ended up in Yuma, and I was down there and had lunch with a friend of mine that works for him. And I also got to see Corey and talk to him a little bit. And my friend, when Corey came back and was in Yuma, said, Corey asked this person who they'd like to hear on the phone. And my friend said, well, President Trump. Well, he came in the next day and President Trump was on Corey's cell phone. But I also stopped at this little, so that was cool to know that I was in Yuma, Colorado, and one of the people running the free world was right there in the next room.
In Yuma, how many people live in Yuma? Just
3,000 to 5,000.
Yeah, not really
good.
good. Yeah.
So that was impressive. But then there's this little coffee shop there in Yuma that got milk in the glass bottles from Goodrich Dairy here. And you can look out there and stop and pick it up. So I pulled up to the drive-up window at this place where I get the milk, and because my boy's not a little bit, and this young lady was there, and she looked to be a high school senior. So I asked her how this was affecting her. And she was obviously has a pretty strong religious faith too. And she said, I think it's a good thing. She said, I think it's going to make us all refocus on what's important. And she said, I think there will be a revival come out of it. And I really took that to heart. And I truly think that as Christians, this is a time of tribulation for us as Christians. Because in this world right now, it is tough to be a Christian and stand up, whether it's just stand there between two people that may not be agreeing with each other. But I think it's truly a time for us to stand up. That's why I go back to my other comment. You know, we need to learn to be nice to each other. I don't care who you are. Doesn't matter what you are. That's how I treat students. I don't care what color you are, what sex you are, what anything. That doesn't matter. You're a human being and you're breathing just like I am, and you're no different than I am. Right? So for me, I'm just really trying to focus what the to go back to a word you said, the legacy that I will leave behind. Will I have truly made a difference? You know, you often wonder how long after you die, when will be the last time somebody will remember your name, right? Have you ever been driving down the road and thinking about people in your life and you think, God, I haven't thought of my Mrs. Jones, my teacher or something for a long time. So, you know, you got to wonder how long you'll be part of the driving force behind somebody's life. You hope it's a long time. So that's the thing that has changed for me the most. I'm waiting for God, kind of like this young gal at Yuma told me. She said, I'm just waiting for God to tell me what to do. That's true. I told him that this morning in my prayers. I hope I do something to make you smile today. And just this conversation with you and I has done that. So,
Good.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks
Sure.
for sharing.